Okay, so I'm not here again today. You should have just finished up your skills check that you took over 9.1. Hopefully that went well. We'll be back and we'll be able to get those graded, hopefully, so that you can get those back next class. I do want you to know that I will be here on Wednesday, so if you have any questions about anything, whether that's related to Algebra 2 or just in general, maybe about your grade, please try to come in before school or during advisory. I will not be here towards the end of the day, third and fourth period, but I will be here before school and during advisory. You also need to make sure that you know that you have a quiz next class that's going to be over adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, finding excluded values, just 9.1 and 9.2. So, getting into today's stuff, today's lesson, multiplying and dividing rationals, it's much simpler than adding and subtracting, just like regular fractions. So if you remember on how we multiply fractions, which we talked about a little bit about this at the beginning of last class with the warm-up, whenever you multiply fractions, all you're doing is multiplying straight across. So if I have 15 times 2, that's going to give me 30. And if I have 8 times 35, that is going to give me 280. Now, after that, you can see if you can reduce it. So you need to see whether or not you can cancel. And that same idea goes along with whenever we're dealing with rational function or rational terms as well. So, rules for multiplication. Make sure that you don't have to necessarily memorize each word on here, but this lays it out for you. One thing that is a little bit different that is my fault on this is finding those excluded values. We're actually going to do that somewhere around step 2. And you can do it at the very end. It'll be a little bit easier to do it around step 2. So, very first thing we're going to do is you'll factor. After that, you'll cancel like factors in the numerator and denominator. This is going to be a little bit different than 9.1, and this is what makes it easy. Whenever I can cancel something out, if I have, let's say I have the factor of x plus 2 in the first fraction, and maybe there's something else over there, I don't know, it doesn't matter. And then I've got whatever down here. And then in my second fraction, if I have x plus 2 in the denominator, okay, maybe I've got other factors right there, it doesn't matter. If I have x plus 2 in the second fraction, I can cancel factors from one fraction to the other. Okay, that is different than adding and subtracting. You could only cancel if it was in the same rational term. So that's one of the big reasons why why multiplying and dividing is easier than adding and subtracting. Multiply numerators and then multiply your denominators. This is pretty simple because all you're really going to do is list out the factors of the numerator, list out the factors of the denominator. After that, your answer will be in reduced form, which will be in the form where it is completely factored out. Sometimes you may be asked to simplify it, so you would multiply or you would FOIL if you have two binomials there. So let's go down to the first example. I'm going to try to get this so I can get the whole thing in one screen, which is good. So, very first thing I'm going to do is factor. So I'm going to factor x squared minus x minus 2. So whenever I do that, I end up with x minus 2 and x plus 1. Then I'm going to factor 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. Whenever I do that, that is going to leave me with 2x plus 1 and x minus 2. And now I'm just going to factor the second fraction. So whenever I factor the numerator right here, 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, that is going to leave me with 2x plus 1 and x minus 3. Whenever I factor the denominator, do not automatically think, well, there's only two terms, so I don't have to factor it. You can look to see if you have a greatest common factor, which this one you do. You can pull out x, and that becomes x times x plus 1. So very first step, very similar to adding and subtracting. I'm going to, well, you can do it in add and subtract. I don't think we do. But I need to factor everything out. After that, I'm going to cancel any like factors that I have in the numerator and denominator. So first thing I'm going to do here, you don't necessarily have to rewrite it all out with each problem, but just so that you can see this step by step, we're going to on here. So all I'm doing right now is just rewriting what I had above. Now I'll give you a couple seconds to make sure that you have all of that written in. Please be careful to make sure to copy it down exactly as above, or it'll mess up. So kind of what I was hinting at earlier, that makes this a little bit easier than adding and subtracting. Whenever you're canceling out your like factors, you can kind of see, even though we got two fractions here, you can see it just as one big fraction. If I've got 2x plus 1 right there, I can cancel it out with 2x plus 1 right there. I can cancel them out if they're in the same fraction. So both x minus 2's will cancel out. I can cancel out the x plus 1's. And then once I have everything canceled out that I can, I'm going to have whatever remains in the numerator, which on this one was x minus 3. And the expressions that remain in the denominator was just x. So my answer was x minus 3 over x. Now those excluded values that I told you that we were going to kind of do in step 2, and then I completely forgot as I was going through the problem. To find your excluded values, what you would do, if you'll kind of follow me back all the way up to kind of between step 1 and step 2, we'll do the work right in here. All you're doing for your excluded values is every factor that is in the denominator, and you had to do this whenever you added and subtracted, again, you're just going to take each one of these and you're going to set them equal to 0. So this one gave me x excluded value of negative 1/2. This one gave me an excluded value of 2. Don't forget the x that's by itself. That would give me 0. And that would give me negative 1. So I've got a pretty decent list of excluded values on this one. Okay, so those would be all excluded values. Remember those excluded values? Those are just the values that would give you a denominator of 0, which hopefully at this point you know that you can't divide by 0. So we have to point out that we can't divide by these numbers, or x can't be these numbers, because that would give me a denominator of 0, which you can't do in the math world. So that is multiplying rational functions. The good thing about dividing is it is the exact same thing except one step at the very beginning, and that one step is pretty simple. So let's first look at just a basic, we'll just do this basic division problem up top with just the actual numbers. So the very first step, whenever you're dividing a fraction by a fraction, that is the same as multiplying by the second fraction's reciprocal. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the second fraction and I'm going to multiply. So that would give me 75 over 30. And then if you can reduce that, then you can. So 75 divided by 5, that's going to give me 15 by 6. I could do it even more. So 5/3. Okay, but Really, the main thing that I want you to get from that is we're just taking that second fraction, we're flipping it, and then we do all the exact same stuff. Whenever you get into the doing it with rationals, it is the exact same idea. We're going to rewrite the division problem as an equivalent multiplication problem. It's just saying I'm going to flip the second fraction, and I'm going to do everything I just did on the front page. So let's go through these steps with this division problem. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite the first rational term and on this second one I'm going to write my denominator as my numerator and my numerator as my denominator. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to factor. So whenever I factor that, looks like this isn't set up very well for this, so we're going to pretend that multiplication is not there. We're going to do multiplication here, and then I'll have my factors for my second fraction over here. So whenever I factor the first one, x squared minus x minus 6, I'm going to have x minus 3, and I'm going to have x plus 2. My denominator of the first one, I'm going to have x plus 4, and then I'm going to have x minus 1. Then whenever I factor my second one, whenever I factor x squared plus 2x minus 8, I get x plus 4 and x minus 2. Whenever I factor x squared minus 5x plus 6, I end up with x minus 2 and x minus 3. Okay. Now on the next step, and since it's not really formatted and set up for us to rewrite it all, we'll just go ahead and cancel it from here. And I'll do it with kind of a highlighter so you can still see what I have written down. So I'm going to look to see what all I can cancel. I've got x plus 4 there, and I've got x plus 4 there. I've got x minus 3, and I've got x minus 3 right there. And I've got x minus 2, and I've got x minus 2. So once I'm done with that, what I have left in the numerator is going to be x plus 2. What I have left in the denominator is x minus 1. So there is my final answer right there. And then to find my excluded values, so x does not equal, these are the values that x cannot equal, I'm going to take each one of these denominators from my factored form and set them equal to 0. So whenever I set x plus 4 equal to 0, that's going to give me negative 4. X minus 1 equal to 0, that's going to give me 1. Then I will have positive 2 and positive 3. So that would be my final answer with my excluded values. So hopefully you can see that adding and subtracting is, and at least in my mind, it is significantly easier than adding and subtracting because you're not having to find the common denominator, and that's really what makes the adding and subtracting so difficult. So again, remember that you have a quiz next class over adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. If you need to come in and get help, please do so. I will be here Tuesday morning. I'll also be here during Tuesday advisory, which the advisory really won't help the B-Day kids that much, but for you A-Day kids, I'll be in here those days, or if you need to talk about anything else. So just to kind of finish out the 6 weeks, you're going to have that quiz next class. You're also going to have that next lesson of solving rational equations for the 11th and 12th. Your calendar says that it is a review. That got changed. We're going to have a 9-4 lesson. We're kind of spreading out what was 9.3 across 2 lessons so that we can really make sure that we hit everything. We'll be talking about direct and inverse variation along with some real-world rational problems. So we will be talking about those. I won't be here either one of those days. So I'll be gone Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You'll have another notes video that you will watch over that. So hopefully you got this. Please make sure that you prepare for the quiz, and I will see you on Tuesday.